$300,000 a script, and Barry Gifford got one of the gigs, and Russell Banks got one of the gigs, and who's the Vietnam writer who did what? Dispatches, yeah. Michael Hare. Michael Hare got one of the gigs, and basically, you know, they work 6 weeks, you get $300,000. I just kept saying, like, send, you know, I'd like to do this, I'd like to try. I never got one. But anyway, Coppola would read the script, and he'd, oh, this is no good, I can't make a film, and he'd throw it in the garbage. And he did that like 12 times, I think 12 times, or at least a dozen scripts written that he just said, I can't use them. And of course, I mean, it wasn't just totally arbitrary, because it is a very hard book to make into a movie, because movies are supposed to move along a plot line, and there is no plot line in On the Road. That was one of the modern things about it. It was moving toward, you know, postmodern novel, non-narrative novel. So Coppola finally gave up on the whole process. He spent a lot of money. And then in about 2000, whenever Motorcycle Diaries came out, 2005 or 2006, 2005 I think, Coppola saw Motorcycle Diaries and said, well, this guy can do motorcycles, he should be able to do cars too. And so he basically offered Walter Salles the rights, negotiated the rights. Coppola did not put in any money, but you know, obviously he's going to make money if the film makes money. And gave it to Walter Salles. And Walter Salles, who I've gotten to know pretty well, is somebody that I admire quite a bit. He came from a very different family than I grew up in working class in Chicago. Walter Salles' father was a banker, and he grew up very, very wealthy in Brazil. Actually grew up mostly in Europe, speaks 6 languages, and a very, very bright guy. Loves the beach, loves Kerouac. And he was humble enough to realize that if he was going to make a movie about On the Road, he really, you know, he's a Brazilian, he doesn't really understand America. So he actually spent a year traveling around America, meeting people that knew Kerouac, people like me who wrote about Kerouac, going to the same locations as Kerouac had been, making a film which has not been released yet, a documentary, which is in tandem with the other one, and I'm not sure when that will be released, but it was going to be called In Search of On the Road, and I actually saw a rough cut of it in San Francisco a couple of years ago. Very impressive film. But he came to see me about 2005 or 2006 in order to interview me and include me in this documentary, and we spent quite a bit of time together then. And then he sort of disappeared. He went off the radar screen, and I wasn't sure what was happening, because originally he was supposed to have gone right from the documentary into the feature film. Well, it turned out that nobody would put up money for On the Road, which I find very, very interesting, because, you know, I talked about the fact that early on the books were out of print, and there was no appreciation for Kerouac in America. One of the things I wanted to add too, I know I'm jumping around here, but when I was first starting my biography of Memory Babe, you know, I was traveling all over the country, 50,000 miles, and I was becoming a little bit legendary myself, because there was this crazy guy going all over the country with a tape recorder, taping people. And I got a call from Oui magazine at that time, 1979 maybe, which was an offshoot of Playboy. It was supposed to be the hip European offshoot of Playboy. Anybody remember Oui magazine? Few people, a few guys who looked at the pictures in there. Okay, but anyway, Oui magazine called me, I think, 79, and, you know, we heard about you. We'd like you to do an article for us on where Kerouac is being taught in the United States. And this time I had a little money. They gave me some seed money so I could make phone calls, you know, and I began this survey. And other than the Naropa Institute in Boulder, I couldn't find any American college that was teaching Kerouac. And this was 1979, just to give you an idea of how vastly things had changed. And so finally I went back to Oui magazine. I said, I've only found one college that's teaching Kerouac. They said, well, you don't have an article. So they gave me a kill fee, and that was it. So my point here is that that's the way things were even in 1979. But, you know, my sense was, well, today, of course, Kerouac is taught in many colleges, and, you know, his name is like gold. And, well, of course, someone would finance a movie, but nobody in America would finance a movie about On the Road. And so, finally, in 2010, this is 4 or 5 years after he gets the rights, Walter Salles got an International Directors Award at the San Francisco International Film Festival, May 2010. And about 2 days later, the French company MK2 sent him a telegram saying, we will finance your film. And it was quite a low budget. It was $25 million, which for the French company was a lot, because what I've learned is French companies hardly ever spend more than $7 or $8 million, but they said they'd come up with 25. But for him, it would, to do a movie of On the Road, that's actually quite a low budget. But Walter called me up, because I saw him at the film festival, and he showed the documentary there, and I'd spent a little time with him in 2010, and then he called me a couple of days later. He said, I just got financing, and I want to do a boot camp, because with the movie Motorcycle Diaries, he'd actually had his actors go to live in a little village in Central America and hang out with revolutionaries, and he called that the boot camp, to immerse the actors in the experience, because the actors are so much younger than what they're playing. And he said it's the same thing here, that the actors are like 20 years old, 22 years old. The Beat Generation is ancient history for them, and they had no idea what it was like. Would you be the first drill instructor? So I was brought up to Montreal to work with Kristen Stewart and Sam Riley and Garrett Hedlund, and also some of the crew. And that's, of course, where I discovered I had the interview with Luann, because one of the people I was working with was Kristen, and she wanted to hear the voice of Luann. And then I pulled this interview out and realized how extensive it was. But it was a great experience. I mean, you can imagine, it was a great experience. And these young actors just really impressed me, that they really cared about Kerouac. They really wanted to do a good job. They really wanted to be faithful. Walter Salas wanted to be faithful to the whole thing. I saw the movie in Cannes in May, and I was very disappointed. I was disappointed because there was so much good about the movie, actually. I felt like it was like a runner who made it 5 feet from the finish line and dropped or something. Some of the performances were just outstanding. Garrett Hedlund, I thought, was outstanding as Neil. Kirsten Dunst, I thought, should get an Academy Award as Carolyn, because I knew Carolyn, I know Carolyn, and she had everything about Carolyn, her voice, her mannerisms, just amazing. The British actor who plays Ginsberg, again, I think should get an Supporting Actor Academy Award. Tom Sturridge does the most amazing portrayal of Ginsberg I've ever seen. He gets so often Ginsberg is caricature, the wild, crazy guy, and even as this guy wrote me a letter, the wild man with the sweat in his hair. But, Ginsberg was a very kind, we have Ginsberg's first secretary sitting back there, Alan Tobias, and as he knows, Ginsberg was a very complex man. And this actor, Tom Sturridge, just, I think, really gets a very complex portrait of Ginsberg. The cinematography is amazingly great. Eric Gaudier is a world-class cinematographer. You get wide-angle shots of the American road, of the West. You fall in love with the road in that movie. But what they didn't do, and they took out for some reason, is the whole spirituality, what I call the spirituality. Jack is they're seeking God. He's seeking his identity. He's seeking who he is. He's seeking to find the brother that he lost, and Neil becomes that brother. All of that is gone, and it becomes a concentration on nudity, nude scenes of Kristen Stewart, and sex scenes, and drug scenes. And the heart, to me, the heart of On the Road is the spirituality. And without that, it's not On the Road. And so I told them that as soon as I saw the movie, and they wanted to sort of write me off, and then they got a lot of bad reviews. And so then they called me back and said, would you help us to re-edit it? And I said, okay. And so they rented a screening room for me in San Francisco, and I got to watch the movie over and over, and I gave them 10 pages of single-spaced notes of what I thought. One of the things I said, I think you should put in some voiceover, so that, because to hear Jack's own words, because it's, one thing to see the sex scene and the drug scene, but if you hear what Kerouac is thinking, and you hear the magic of his voice, it becomes a whole different thing. For example, one scene that really bothered me in the movie, Kerouac told Ginsberg that the most important scene in On the Road was the scene where Neil abandons Jack and Luann in San Francisco. They've just traveled across the country together, and Jack is really high, he's so excited, ecstatic, he's crossed the country with this man he loves, Neil Cassidy, and suddenly Neil just drops him off on the street corner. Bye-bye, kids, I gotta go back to Carolyn. They have no money, and they're destitute. Well, in the book, as most of you, some of you remember, he's destitute, he's picking up butts off the street, he's staring in a bakery window, and he can't buy the bakery, and the woman looks out at him like he's a thief, he's unshaven. And then Kerouac goes off into this amazing golden riff of poetry. I had reached the end of chronological time, where all of the angels dove off the plank into the uncreated void of eternal emptiness, da-da-da. It's 3 pages of just golden prose. And when they were making the movie, I said, well, use that as a voiceover. But in the movie, in Cannes, the Cannes version, you see him picking up the butts off the street, and that's the end of it. You don't hear I'd reached the end of chronological time, which puts it into a whole different perspective, really enriches it, So anyway, I told them all this. I have no idea if they used it, but the new version is being released today at the Toronto International Film Festival. And it's going to be released December 21st in the United States. So I haven't seen the new version. I have no idea if they took any of my suggestions. I hope they did.
Okay.
Wait until we're ready.
It's very clear, Jerry, you've played an extraordinary part in Kerouac for 40 years. I feel we've slightly misrepresented you because there's so much more to you than what you've done with Kerouac. But sadly, time is against us, and I'd like to give some people here a chance to ask you questions.
Okay.
I know they're likely to focus on things like the film, but as I said, I know we've slightly, well, very much misrepresented the wholeness of your work in your life and focusing on Kerouac.
I'm working on a book about Ntozake Shange right now. I'd like you to know.
I was going to say
who was a pioneer of black women's writing in America and who's been very much forgotten and pushed aside. And that's, again, there's a part of me that just wants to be a champion for the people who need champions. Need champions, I guess. Anyway,
you've been a very good champion for Kerouac. We will take questions. Alan.
I've asked this of some others. Do you think that to really understand Jack deeply in the spiritual sense, you need to be a Latin Catholic?
Well, I am an Italian Catholic, so maybe I had it in there. I don't know. But, no, I understand what you're saying. I think it helps. I mean, I'd be lying if I said it didn't help. I was raised with all Father, Son, Holy Ghost. I was raised with the hope of the saints and the intensity of that. Of course. I mean, it helps. I don't know if you have to be. I mean, it's kind of like the whole thing about women's literature. They say, well, men can't understand women's literature. I mean, there has to be some universal where we can cross over, where we're all human beings, So, maybe I don't fully understand women's literature, but I think I can understand some of it. So I think it's the same thing.
Yeah. No, just concur on saying, I still think that
Say that really loud, okay?
Especially that bit. Louder and funny.
It's really loud. I'd just like to start by saying, frankly, Gerald, I think that Memory Babe is still the best flower to
Thank you. Thank you.
No doubt about it. And eventually I'll get to my question in that regard, but I'd just like to say something about that long and unfortunate battle that we've had to fight, which I can understand it's been bitter and upsetting for you. I think I should warn people that when you're writing about Kerouac and you're thinking about how you're going to write about him, you could get caught up in that war. I bear the scars of it myself, because you're showing your respect and admiration for the sincere and back bar on it. I mean, I don't really know how to talk about that without being extremely angry and upset, but it's a sign really of how sick this whole thing has become. My question to you, Gerald, is now much of the material that you couldn't gain access to is in the public sphere, and there's the notion of fair quoting you could use.
No. John Sampas has set it up so that I could go into the Berg Library because they can't keep me out. It's a public institution. But I cannot use that material without John Sampas's permission. So effectively, I cannot use any of that material in the Berg collection.
Yeah, but you can use the published
the roll manuscripts.
The books and the manuscript roll is now out, and they're quoted from, or
What's
got
that?
a lot on those as well. I'm asking for information. Has he got a lot on the scroll version?
Well, I think anything that's published, you can go to the publisher for permission.
Yeah, that's
So I think that, yeah,
I'm saying a lot of it now is published.
Yeah, so I think I could quote from published material.
So given that the vast bulk now, the really seminal stuff is published and can be published, have you ever thought of doing a revised memory guide which would take account of that, or would that just be too much or something?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. I really want to answer it because I don't think that with the limitations that would be put on me, that I couldn't use the journals, that I would be able to do the best job. But I do want to address the question of where I think Kerouac scholarship can go, for those of you who are allowed in to use it. The journals, I think, are unfortunately, I don't know we'll ever see the manuscripts because they were sold into public hands, and those would have been very valuable too. But I think there are things in the journals that really could aid people in. I think that the place that Kerouac scholarship needs to go, I mean, there are several places, but one is we really need to understand his artistry better. I don't think we understand his impact fairly well, and there's still work to be done there, but I don't think we really understand Kerouac's artistry. What was he really trying to do? Was he really trying to get the voice? Was he really trying to do symbolism? You know, I think that getting into the actual art of what he was trying to do as an artist, as a writer, because he was a very conscious artist and creative writer. He wasn't this crazy, as you all know, not the crazy guy just hitting the typewriter keys. I think there's a lot of work that can be done there into getting into, you know, the nitty-gritty technical aspects of what he was trying to do and how he was doing it. But I think that the journals are going to be very important. For example, because I told you I saw this advanced copy of Joyce Johnson's new book, The Vision Is All. And she quotes something in there from Kerouac. She has been using the journals extensively. And she quotes something from the journals where Kerouac said, I think Céline's real self, in his writings, Céline's real self was pursuing his shadow self. And I thought, wow. I mean, that's formidable. That's really impressive. If I had known that he thought in that manner, I might have looked at some of those other novels in a different way. If he saw Céline's real self pursuing his shadows, maybe in his own novels his real self was pursuing his shadow self. So just even pulling a couple of lines out of his journal, you could almost reinterpret his novels on the basis of that. So, and there's evidently a lot of journals there. So I mean, think of how much you might be able to find that would shed new light on what he was doing as a creative artist. But I'm going to be blocked from using a lot of that stuff, so I don't think I'd be able to do the best job just by using some of the new stuff that's been published, which would be helpful, of course.
Sorry, interesting. Alan, has anybody else got a good question before we're actually on? No? Okay, shoot.
Jerry, as a point of law, you noticed that any of these unpublished manuscripts, journals, etc., unknown poems, unknown, escape the clutches of the Sampuses, and since they don't, even though they have a right under Florida law to keep what they've stolen, are there any things out there that don't belong to them that other people can publish?
None that I know of. Oh, back there. Yes. Okay, thank you. Very good question. Well, when Jan filed her lawsuit in 1994, and I came out publicly in support of her, in 1987 I put all of my Memory Babe archives at University of Massachusetts Lowell Mogan Center, which is the special collections, for public study. I mean, that was the reason I put them there, very clearly, so that everybody would have access. 300 taped interviews, transcriptions of all those taped interviews, the Xeroxes of the 2,000 letters that I read. I mean, it was a very large archive. After I came out publicly in support of Jan Kerouac, John Sampas walked into the Lowell into the University of Massachusetts library and said, I want this whole collection locked up, and no one gets access to it. He did not have the legal right to do that at all, but Lowell is a small town, and the Sampas family is a very powerful family there, because they were powerful before they got the Kerouac archive. They ran the vice in Lowell. I mean, they ran the bookie joints and the prostitution joints and the strip joints. That's who they were. So they had power and they understood money way before they got the Kerouac archive. Once they got this $30 million Kerouac estate, they became very powerful in the small town of Lowell. So he had the kind of power. When he went in the library, the UMass library, and said, I want this archive locked up, they locked it up. And even I, who had created the archive, was not allowed to go in and see my own archive. I could not go and hear my own tapes. I could not see my own transcriptions. And I had to fight a legal battle for 15 years with pro bono lawyers from Massachusetts for the Arts. And I finally won by settlement in 2007. And the settlement was, one of the things I was really concerned about was these tapes were old audio tapes, magnetic tapes, and they were deteriorating. The magnetic dust was coming off of them, and the interviews were starting to become, some of them were becoming unlistenable. If they had kept them under lock and key much longer, they would have had a bunch of magnetic dust. And so the settlement that was struck, they settled right before it went to trial because they knew they were going to lose. John Sampas had no legal right to lock up that archive. The settlement was I agreed to pay to digitalize all of the tapes, and they agreed to open the collection and to give me the digital copies of all the tapes. So the collection now is open. It is accessible. You can go to UMass Lowell, Morgan Center, and listen to the tapes. Unfortunately, they were such poor stewards of it that they allowed a lot of material to be stolen. Not the tapes, but I had many, many autographed letters. When I was working on Memory Babe, I was corresponding with Burroughs, with Lawrence Ferlinghetti, with John Quillen Holmes, with Allen Ginsberg. I had over probably a couple of hundred autographed letters from all these people, and 60 of those letters were stolen. They just let people walk out with them, which really enraged me. Letters from Ginsberg, from Burroughs. So some of that collection was stolen. It's not there, but the tapes are all there, and the transcriptions are there. And as far as the Kerouac Xerox letters, I was told a few of them are missing, but I think most of them are there. And now apparently they're trying to take care of it because they know I wasn't too happy about what happened with it. But you can't all go there, and it's absolutely worthwhile for anyone that's doing Kerouac scholarship because again, I interviewed these people at a very early period when their memories were still good. You know, in the 77 when Jack was just dead 8 years, so people's memories were very good at that time.
We actually
Oh wait, one more question.
One more question. Okay, Sarah. Yeah.
I was going to say that I was also in the Burke collection, and I had difficulty to photocopy one of the papers, and I had to email John Sampas to say that I was PhD student, and I'm going to and he wrote me back saying, so why do you do any research about Kerouac and Shakespeare? I don't think there's a connection. So instead of saying, but he commented on my research, and you can't do it. No, you can't do that research. There's a connection, so I'm not going to let you photocopy that. So anyway, eventually I got to photocopy, but so it was interesting to exchange emails with him about my research and permission itself.
Did you finally get to Xerox it? They finally allowed it or not?
They did.
They did.
Surprising, I was surprised. He was, yeah, I know. I was surprised to have heard from him. So so I sent him out to Isaac. So I think he was the curator.
Yes,
So,
Isaac Gewurz, yes.
Gewurz, sorry. Gewurz. And so eventually I got focused, but it was very difficult.
And it's funny, and John Sampas said there's no connection between Shakespeare and Kerouac.
That's what he said.
Well, Kerouac used to rave about Shakespeare. I mean, he used to say Shakespeare is the greatest writer in the English language.
That's what my research was
Yes.
about. So I gave a paper about Kerouac and Shakespeare, and so looking at especially Shakespeare's influences on Kerouac's writing, that he actually called his Shakespeare's writing as spontaneous writing, that I found very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really I'm passionate about my research in the archives, and so happy to bring it here too, and to share with you. So those of you who make it, and I'm really happy. My question is about actually, first thing, when I'm my professor, my senior advisor suggested to read only your book. He said, don't let any biographies please, so just read Gerald Nicosia's Memory Babe. So when I was reading, so I came across, like, there's a chapter, Forest of Arden.
Yes.
I was saying, I said to Professor Ellis, but there's a chapter, Forest of Arden. He said, are you sure? I said, yes, I saw it. So and then he was saying, oh, all right, I didn't notice that before. So it was my first reference to, first reference to Shakespeare. So it was in your book. I was so I don't know, it was first connection. I was so happy to find it. Yeah, it was great. So I was just wondering, why did you make a chapter of Forest of Arden? Why did you put it there?
Well, because Ginsberg told me that when they were very young, in the mid-40s or early 40s, when they would walk around New York and they would see a scene that struck them for any reason, whether it was the people or something, one of them would turn to the other Jack around and say, and this is the Forest of Arden.
Yeah.
And they used to do that to each other all the time, so I thought it was very significant.
Oh, thank you. That's what my research was about. So, and you said also in your book
Yes, yes, yes.
And then, what were the discussions? What were they talking about? Manhattan, I mean, like, were they replacing Manhattan into Arden or Arden into Manhattan, or was it like a play within a play?
I think they always would see the people around them as characters in plays. I mean, they would do that all the time. In fact, they would act out their own skits, as you know, Burroughs and Ginsberg and Kerouac in The Apartment, and Hal Chase. They would even put on slight costume and wrap a scarf around their head, and they loved to act out things. So they were always seeing their own lives in dramatic terms, even before any of them had written books. And I think part of it was, yes, they were seeing themselves in terms of Shakespeare plays and so on, and in terms of the Forest of Arden. And of course, Burroughs too was famous for quoting
Yes.
Shakespeare all the time,
Because
you know.
he